Hey everybody, it's Joe. Thank you for watching part 2 of my detailed tour of the Cybertruck General Assembly line during the Cybertruck Delivery Event on the 30th of November. Now, we get a chance to see Giga Texas often in images like this from my drone, and we can tell a lot of information, but this time we get to go inside and see quite a bit of the work that has been done and the current status of the General Assembly lines within Giga Texas. So we'll start with this highlighted section of the main factory. This is where the bulk of the Cybertruck Delivery Event activities took place, also where we've been seeing all of the process with setting up the General Assembly lines 2 and 3 within Giga Texas. For this tour, it's important to remember that Giga Texas is arranged in a grid coordinate system. We'll be using this throughout the video. Now, this runs from the north to the south, grid lines 1 through 84 currently, and from the west to the east, Alpha or A through Z, sometimes Z1. The bottom right-hand corner is where all of the activities for the Cybertruck Delivery Event took place. You can also see that highlighted area with the stars. This is where we will tour through the General Assembly lines for the Cybertruck on the ground floor. To help put all this back into context, this is that highlighted section of Giga Texas, the southwest corner, and the inset section of the grid coordinate system that we will be using. To help put into perspective what we saw and how much of the factory during the Cybertruck Delivery Event, this purple section shows you the ground floor area that the public viewed. And I'll be using this image and some video clips from the 4th of June 2021 during construction, so you get a good sense of how much we saw and also how much we have not seen of the factory. Now, if you combine what we were able to see at Cyber Rodeo, also some shareholder meetings, and the Cybertruck Delivery Event, altogether, the public has seen maybe 30% of the factory, and much of that has been developed significantly since the public has seen inside. I also just want to give you a good reference here of where in the factory all of these events took place and what we'll be seeing in the videos. Now, with this image, I want to show you how I will be approaching the tour. This is where the keynote event happened. You can see the map in the upper right-hand corner. The grid coordinate H83 is that column you see on the left-hand side of the screen. And the purple area with the yellow star is where all of the crowd was for that event. Now, one of the things that came to mind with this location for the end of line of the Cybertruck is, as you can see by this recent video clip, the exit point for the Cybertrucks is on the south end of the building. You can see the arrow. You can actually see some Cybertrucks inside. Also, the extension of the building work is well underway here. So that brings to my mind the question of what's going to happen with the internal routing of the Cybertrucks once the structure on the south end is completed. You can see where the exit point is now, the new end of line and outbound lot across the highway, and also the current testing and outbound lots on the east side. So I think we're going to see some internal routing changes for the Cybertruck, and I'll be watching this over the coming weeks and months so we can see what's going to happen. And finally, before we get into the tour, one last thing I want to show you is that there's a number of signs you'll see throughout the tour, and I'll refer to them periodically. On the upper left, you'll see a sign like this. This is all over the site, and it's a way of further defining where things are located within the factory. In this particular one, this shows you General Assembly Line 2, FN1 is finishing 1, and then they have some additional information, and this is where the rear aero shield stamping assembly for the Cybertruck is assembled. We can also see the upper two on the right. One is for the rear suspension assembly. The other one is for the front suspension assembly. On the bottom left, we'll see a number of signs like this where it indicates what is going on with this particular part of the factory. And we'll also see what they call street signs. In fact, this one is the final assembly 1 and 2, and also the intersection with end of line. So now, with all of that information and context and understanding how we're going to be conducting the tour, let's get ready to start that. We're going to be on the ground floor and touring General Assembly Line 2, which is for the Cybertruck production. So we'll begin the tour here at the south end on grid line F81, as you can see by the inset map. We're also at the intersection of Final 1 and 2 Street and end of Line Street. The General Assembly line actually runs from the north to the south, but we'll be going in reverse order. Also, I thought you might find this interesting on the outside of the building in the same general location in A79. You can see that with the inset map in the bottom right. This is what it looks like. It's also where those temporary platforms have been located. A lot of equipment's been loaded up. On the section that I have the arrow with the circle, this is where the robotic assembly of the Cybertruck doors takes place. And they bond the stamped inner structure to the stainless steel outer shell. And all of this is done with the robots. You can see the yellow robots in this section. Along the entire third floor, there's a lot of this type of assembly and production for the Cybertruck that takes place. So pretty cool to see that it's a multi-level vertical production process that they have. And we're going to see a lot of that throughout the rest of the tour. So as you can tell, we're at that intersection. We're turning towards the north. We are at F81 going to F80. You'll see those on the columns in the upper left here on the left-hand side of the screen. And this is the section of the line where the trucks are nearly completed and they're in final preparation, final assembly before they go over to the end of line section, which is located 2 grid coordinates to the right. On the right-hand side, we can see these platforms. They have these accordion lifting capabilities. They hold Cybertrucks and they move along these platforms as part of the assembly process.
Here, look this way. You'll be on the video. At least it won't be a lot of sound, but you'll see it in there when I cut you in there. All right.
Now, using these devices, all the moving and lifting of the Cybertrucks are done automatically and robotically. So that really frees up people from having to be in an area where it could be kind of dangerous for them or difficult for operations. That's a good view of this Cybertruck in this location. As you can tell, we are in coordinate F73, and we're working our way north along General Assembly Line 2. Now, one of the things that I did notice, off into the distance, you'll see some red lights in a darkened section. Those are other parts of the assembly line that's either not for public viewing or they're continuing to build out more of the production capacity in that area. Over on this side, we can see various stations to build out the Cybertrucks. Also on the top, you can see one of those signs that we talked about at the beginning. This is General Assembly Line 2. Final line 1 and some additional information. Also, the inset map shows you we are on grid line F77 and where we are located within the factory. Now, because we are at the south end working our way to the north, you'll notice that the Cybertrucks are mostly completed at this point. As we continue the tour along the line heading towards the north, you're going to see the Cybertrucks become less and less completed. That's because we're approaching closer to the front of the production line. This is a good view of the Cybertruck body without the fender liners and the fender installation on the sides. It also gives you a good idea what the stainless steel looks like without all of those plastic parts installed. On this side, we can see that the truck bed liner has been installed by this point of the line. You can see many of those raised platforms that can move, and that's for the Cybertrucks to continue to process through this particular line. And a good view on the left-hand side of the number of stations that will be used for the assembly. In fact, on both sides, this really gives you an idea of the capacity that they will have for the Cybertruck.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Glad you're here.
You too.
As we turn towards this direction, another great shot of a partially assembled Cybertruck. The charging port has been installed. You can see most of the interior, none of the doors, and this image gives you a really good idea of how that passenger cabin that's stamped is looking at this stage of production. We're at grid coordinate F73, and the interior map shows you a pretty good idea of where this image has been taken. A common question people have is, what is the production rate at Giga Texas? And I don't know, but Sandy Munro was just recently quoted as saying he believes it's at 60 units per hour. And we'll be able to find out very soon with the drone flights if that is accurate out at the outbound lot. I do hope it is. Now, as we get over here, we can see some of these stainless steel sail panels that go on top of the windows, and this image gives you a good view as well. Also, we can get a good sense of where we are located in the factory. We are at coordinate F72. Now, what we'll see with most of these stainless steel outer shell panels is that they are affixed using a variety of methods. A lot of them are adhesives and also with a understructure that is bonded to the stainless steel, and we'll see that later in the video. Now, getting back to what Sandy Munro said is, if they are at a rate of 60 per hour, that should be pretty noticeable via the drone flights in the very near future. I also understand that the day after the Cybertruck Delivery Event, the production line was ramping up much farther and faster than it has been. So I'll be keeping an eye out for that in the near future. This is the sub-assemblies for the rear bumper of the Cybertruck. This gives you a really good view of what these look like without the plastic bumper cover on top. And it looks like it's pretty robust and definitely capable of holding that 11,000 pound towing capacity that has been advertised. Now, as we continue to move through the processing line, I noticed this on the left-hand side of the screen. This is that molded plastic bed for the Cybertruck. This is a good view of how it looks like. Now, the interesting thing is this bed is installed directly onto the castings, and there's really no other structure underneath it. So the purpose of that bed liner is just to hold cargo. It does not provide any structural strength to the vehicle, at least from what I could tell. Now, this is the line for the wheels. This gives you a good idea of how they are maneuvered throughout this particular location. As we look underneath, we see those platforms again that move the bodies. Looks like there's some robotic machines that do the torquing of the lug nuts. You can see that machine hanging down with the yellow pieces on the end. And it's just amazing the amount of automation that is being done here. We see another elevator lift system on the left, and some more of the bodies on the movable platforms here for the Cybertrucks. You see several onto the right as well. They come down from the elevators onto this platform, and then they are moved to the next particular location. I think the amount of automation here is far more than people had expected before this event. And here's another good shot of where the tires and wheels are attached to the vehicle. We can see we're on F68 for the grid coordinate and where that is located within the factory. Also, if we take a look on the outside at a very similar location at A69, this gives you a good view of what we would see from the outside. We're on top of these receiving doors, and they are listed with W97, 98, 99. That means west and those locations. Also, the amount of equipment and materials on the second and third floor, all of which is related to Cybertruck production. Now, one thing you may notice is that the Cybertrucks are facing to the north here. That's because as they come down on the left-hand side, they do a turnaround at some point, and then they continue the final assembly on this side of the line. So instead of just a straight line from the north to the south, the production line actually goes back and forth throughout this entire section. And the width of this is only about 2 grid coordinates wide, which is about maybe 100 feet or about 30-something meters wide from the left to the right, which is pretty incredible. Now, this is a good shot of the grid coordinate F66 and where we are located here within the factory with this diagram. This is also a great shot of some of the elevator systems that are used to move the Cybertruck bodies and other the parts that are used during General Assembly from the ground floor where we are at up through the second and to the third floor where other assembly of the Cybertruck takes place, particularly things like the doors, the hood, and other parts are done 2 stories above where we are sitting right now. Now this is a really good view of this rotisserie item, and again this is all robotics. This is a way of taking the Cybertruck bodies and then turning them 90 degrees to position them appropriately for the lift. And this image here gives you a good view of the grid coordinate system of where we are located right now. Now, as we continue to this intersection area, this is where the tour will take a turn 1 grid coordinate to the left. So instead of being on the F, we'll be on the E grid coordinate line. This is also where they had a display of many of the Cybertruck bodies. Again, this is a good idea of where we are located in the grid system, F64, and you can see that kind of that shift over to the left. So we'll be going from grid coordinates F to E shortly after this video segment. And what I'm trying to show you here is the good detail view of the castings and also how they are attached to the stamped inner structure for the passenger cabin. This is another good view here of some of the assembled parts, that front suspension with the wheels attached, how that front casting looks. There are some stamped parts that are bolted directly to the castings to make the structure necessary to put on the exterior panels. You can also see how the interior is installed because they do this on top of the structural battery, which makes the floor. So all of this assembly work of the seats, the center console, and some other ideas are just bolted outside of the car and then put in and affixed into the vehicle, creating the structure. And it's a good view of some of that on the floor, some of the bolts that are necessary to combine the structural pack to the front casting on the left, and also a good detail view of this stamped inner structure that forms the passenger compartment and is the section in between the 2 castings. This is a really good view of the rear casting. Now there's the casting itself, which is the part where you see the motor attached and some of the suspension. And then you can see those sails on either side, and those are attached to the castings as well. And this is what forms the bed of the truck. Now earlier we mentioned that plastic liner. It just sits in the middle here, and then the stainless steel panels are bonded or bolted on the other side. So just behind the stainless steel and the plastic liner, this is what you would see. Now you do see 2 of those vents in the firewall between the passenger compartment and here. Those are just vents. Those are very common on vehicles. It allows for the flow-through ventilation through the interior to the exterior, and it is not a way that I believe would be usable for, say, if you had a camping tent or you intended to camp in the bed. That's not really a way to allow the air conditioning or the heating to come through. And as far as I know, from what I can see and what I've heard, is that rear window does not come down as well. So anyway, this is a good, hopefully detailed view for you of this entire rear end, how it is manufactured, how it is assembled, and then how the castings on the front and rear combine with that inner stamped passenger shell. And then here's another display with a close-up of those sail panels that are attached to the rear casting. One other detail is you'll see the rollable rack mounts that they are on right now. We've seen a lot of these being delivered on the west side and also on the north side of the factory. And it's good to see what we've been able to determine from the drone now in actual use here inside the factory. And I'm going to continue to maneuver the around the Cybertruck display here. You can see the bonded window. We're going to see shortly where that is done on the assembly line. And again, this is a good close-in view of the front motor, the steering, and how this is installed into the vehicle. It's actually pretty efficient because a lot of this stuff can be done without having to worry about the interior, because the interior is installed in one fell swoop on that structural pack. Here's another good view of some of the castings, and then, as I mentioned, here's how the interior is done. You see that structural pack, you see the seats, the console, some of the electronic equipment, some of the vents for the heating and ventilation system. All of this is done together, and then once their appropriate time for marrying this up with the body, that is done very close to this point of the factory, and the interior is done very quickly. So as I pan the camera to the left, we get a chance to see more of the assembly line. As I mentioned, this is where we will turn from grid coordinate F63, where we are now, one coordinate over to the left to E63, and we'll resume the tour. And also you can see where more of the sub-assemblies for the suspension is installed on the left-hand side of this image. I also want to give you a view from outside the factory in the same general area. You can see B63 is the coordinate and what this looks like. Also the amount of materials on the second and third floors. Now I'm going to turn around here and show you an interesting and fun thing that Giga Texas has. They have this small cart that's used for personnel to drive around Giga Texas, and they've made it into a cyber cart. And I think this is pretty cool how they did that. It's even got a tailgate with that red LED bar. And take a look at the front here. It's got the LED Cybertruck front end as well. So pretty cool, and it's neat to see that they have this kind of fun here at Giga Texas. Now behind this wall, or this covered area, we see the final one street, also where they have the dolly loading and the receiving doors on the right hand side. You can also get a good sense of how they have like a warehouse effect here. That's all of the items that are brought in that are needed for production, and that's where they are temporarily stored until they are needed. Good view of where that display was, and we can see we're at the corner of Cyber and Subframe Boulevard and Street, also West Subframe location here. Another good view of this elevator system that is installed to move bodies from one floor to the other with the inset grid map. You can see we are on E63 and where we are located currently within the factory. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the video, as we continue to progress towards the north, we're going to see Cybertrucks in less developed stages because we're heading closer towards the start of the general assembly versus where we started towards the end. But this is a really good view next to this lift system on the left of where we are located, and what we're seeing is the beginning of the rear kit. That's RK you see on the assembly line here. You can see the platforms. They're putting the brakes, the calipers, looks like the steering knuckles. All of this will be placed on this particular platform, and it will move for robotic assembly of the front and rear suspensions. And we're also at E62, and the inset map gives you a really good idea of where we are located. Now, as I zoom back out, pay attention way in the background. You can see a lot more of the setup of assembly lines. This is going to be for further expansion of the production lines. And as we talked at the very beginning of the video, we're only seeing a small fraction of Giga Texas. So for several more grid coordinates off to the right into that dark area, Giga Texas is continuing to expand and grow its production capability, which is pretty amazing to think about. Now, as you can tell here with the column, we are on E61, and with the inset map, this gives you a pretty good idea of where we are located. Again, we're continuing to move towards the north through General Assembly and going in opposite direction of how it operates. And I also thought I would show you where we are on the outside of the building. You can see the arrow. This is B61, so we're on the same grid line from the north-south. And this gives you a really good view of more of the activity that is going on here on the 3rd floor for Cybertruck and what's going on the 2nd floor as well. And take a look at this. This is some of those vehicle carrying items. They move the vehicles around. They have to do this right now because they don't have all the wheels or the suspension on. And this really helps move the production line along without having to have people moving the vehicles. This also is, again, an image showing you the grid coordinate where we're located. We are at E60. And in the background, you can actually see some of the open receiving doors with some of the sunlight coming in. And again, that helps give us a cross-reference of where we would see on the outside of the building during the drone flights.
How you guys doing?
Good, how are you?
Doing great. Going for the altitude here. But thank you guys for having us out here. I appreciate it.
You can also see quite a few of those car carriers along this kind of the ceiling mounted movable system, and you can get a really good sense of how this structure and the machinery works to maneuver the bodies. As I mentioned, in the distance you can see some of the sunlight. That's where those open receiving doors are on the west side of the factory. And we are still just a little bit south of the main entrance portion of the factory as well. And that's where the tours began and where all of the invitees came through. And we've also seen a lot of how that main entrance looks as it's been developing. So here's a good close-in view of some of the machinery that is used here on the section. We also get a sense to see that there's some robots in action. We'll see that shortly. But I wanted to just give you another view here of how the suspension, the motors, everything is being assembled onto these movable platforms. And this all takes place outside of the vehicle body, so it's a lot more efficient. You don't have to work around the body and the castings of the vehicle. All of this is done outside. And again, if you look in the back, you see where there's a lot more of the workstations, a lot more production capacity that is either being in the final stages of being assembled or continuing to be built out here at Giga Texas. And again, the signs RS1 shows rear suspension line 1 and how this is looking right now. As I turn back towards the west here, I'll give you a good view of some interesting things. This is the front fenders, and what I really want to show you here is not only the coordinate system of where we are located, but also I want to go into some detail how these are made and how they are attached to the vehicle. Now I'm going to use this crash test demonstrator that was out at front of the main entrance for the event. Take a look at the panels on the left and the right. You can see how they have that inner stamped structure that is adhesively bonded to the stainless steel. And then this is what is attached to the castings using bolts. And those are pretty obvious within this particular image that you are seeing. And then with this image, this goes back to the rack on the assembly line and gives you a good idea again of how these look and how they are arranged for installation onto the truck. And this is all done by robotic assemblers, and I think that's pretty cool to see how this is done. I was wondering how the stainless steel skin was actually affixed to the body, and this tells us quite a bit of how that is done. I'll maneuver around here, give you a good view of how those fenders are being attached. You can also see that the trunk lid has already been attached by this point. But it's a good view. You can see the fender, you can see the robot, and they just pick them up and they will assemble them right onto the vehicle. And they have the fenders, the left and the right, on either side. So it's a pretty quick pickup, install, bolt them on, and the fenders are completed. So pretty cool. There's another section of these front fenders with a little bit different view. You also get a good sense of how the stainless steel is folded and shaped to make these front fenders. And of course you can see that underlying stamped section that is bonded to it. Now this is a great opportunity here to get in close and watch some of the robots in action. So I'm going to come in here towards the fence section and give you a good view of some of the activity that is underway here within this section. And again, I want to just point out that all of this is being done robotically. You don't see any humans doing any of these body panel assembly. And I think that's just amazing to see how all of this is done and the level of automation that Tesla has brought to the Cybertruck. And I think that bodes very well for the production capacity, the production rate, and also the ramping that we can see with the production coming up in the coming months. I think all of this is just a really great sign. Now on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see more of those rear suspensions almost completed now at this point in the line, and then they will be moved over to the opposite side where they are assembled onto the vehicle. And usually that's called a marriage, where they take the underbody sections and the structural pack and they will marry it onto the body in white. Here's a good view of the rear fender being installed. Again, note all of this is being done by robotic assemblers. On this side of the line is a good view of the pretty much completed rear suspension. You can actually see some of the orange high tension cables for the drive unit, the main battery, and that's been assembled onto that unit already. And also just gives you an idea of just the modular construction that they use and just how much is installed onto all of these subframes before they even get close to the vehicle itself. Robots working here. This particular one is where it applies the rubber adhesive to the windows, and this is a good view of where we are located within the factory using the inset grid map. And you can see we are on grid coordinate E55 where this robot is located. So let's watch it in operation. They're not actually applying the adhesive right now because it's for demonstration for the Cybertruck delivery event, but it is really cool to see how the robots do this, and then they will position the glass, install it directly onto the vehicle. One of the interesting things for the production of the Cybertruck is how early in the process the glass is installed. You can see that the entire front windshield and the roof glass is installed. They're getting ready to put that triangular front piece in as well. And that's pretty much all of the glass. They have that rear window into the bed, and it's already in as well. And just pretty cool. Now here's a good close-in view of that assembled rear suspension. And this is what it would look like just before they are ready to install it onto the body.
One thing that is very noticeable to me is there's still quite a bit of open space that could be developed. And I know that you're working on a bunch of other stuff, but very, very cool to see. There is, but
you can also see the FS1. We are now in the area where the front suspension is being put together. And as we continue further to the north, you'll be able to see the front suspension sub-assemblies being put together, and I'll show you that here shortly. I wanted to give you the view of this car carrier and also the location of where we are located in the factory, once again using this grid coordinate map on the upper right. With these views, we can definitely tell that we're earlier on in the production process of the Cybertruck. None of the exterior body panels have been installed, but you can tell that the structural pack interior has already been installed at this point, plus the roof and the front windshield. So it's just an interesting observation right now of how the process to build the Cybertruck goes. And the bulk of it is that front and rear casting, that middle stamped passenger shell. Once that's all together, then the installation is essentially putting a large number of sub-assemblies directly in. The structural pack with the interior is sub-assembly. We see the front suspension sub-assembly on the right here, and that's just installed directly as well. This is a good still shot showing you again the coordinates where we are located. And we are in E53, and this is where the front hood is installed. Now, they were kind enough to have a demo unit here. We'll take a look at it, but here you can tell that the underlying stamped structure is bonded to the stainless steel. You can see that through the openings. Then they put the trim pieces around, and then this is how the robots pick it up and maneuver it for installation into the vehicle. Again, this is pretty early in the process because they haven't done any of the body panels yet. Here's a good close-in view of this display showing you what the front trunk, the light assembly, and some of the trim pieces look like. The stainless steel on here is two separate pieces, one for the top, one for the front, and then they're bonded to that substructure. And a good view here of how the Cybertruck is looking. Again, it's interesting that the interior is put in while it's just the castings and that main shell for the passengers and before any of the body panels. It's very efficient. Now, this is, again, the front suspension one line. You can see how it's being put together on those sub-assembly sections, and then those are moved along that line, and they finish that assembly. Here's another good view of some of those car carriers. Again, we're earlier in the production of the Cybertrucks, so they are less developed, but at this point you can definitely tell that the front and rear suspension sub-assemblies have been installed at this point. And for the assemblies that are on the right-hand side of the line here, and then the bodies on the left-hand side that we see here under this movable roof-mounted system, that means that they need to cross over. So there are several points along the line where the items from one side cross over to the left. And we've seen that in several different sections along this tour so far. But I think this is a really good view of how this work is progressing. And again, the level of automation is just amazing of what they've been able to do with something as complex as the Cybertruck. Now, I know that people have talked about how complex the Cybertruck is to make. I think what they're really referring to is making all of this production system to be able to make the Cybertruck, and that is what is very difficult. Now, here's a good inset view of the front suspension line. You can see we are on E50, and this is where we are located in the factory. We can also tell that we've moved far to the north now along the production line. And a quick shot here of the column, you can see E50, and that just confirms where we are in the factory. And as we continue to maneuver this direction, we can see that the front suspension sub-assemblies are getting more and more developed as we go along this line. You can also see some of the brakes and calipers and the steering knuckles that have been pre-assembled already. Now here's another one of these very large vehicle lifts. Again, these are used to move the bodies from the upper floors down to the ground floor. And with this inset image, you can see we are on E48. Also, on the left-hand side of the screen, you see that white wall. That's the rear of the main entrance for Giga Texas. So I think that's pretty cool to see just how close the production lines are, right behind a drive path and then the wall for the main entrance. There's a good video showing you how this lift system works and moving up higher up to the next floor. There's also a good view right now. All of the suspension subassemblies and the structural pack has been assembled into the vehicle at this point in the production process. So pretty cool to be able to see that and see underneath the Cybertruck during the production process. We're getting closer to the point where the tour comes to an end, but you'll be able to see the portion of the assembly where the windshields are installed and the roof glass panels on the Cybertrucks directly ahead of where we see those robots working. You can see some of those Cybertruck bodies and also one of the very large glass window panels right here. What you'll see here with this inset map is where we are located for the Model Y end of line, and this E46 line and the map gives you an idea of where we're located. You can see those lit structures. That's the end of line final checkout for the Model Ys. And interestingly enough, on the outside of the building, we can see this section. You can see those two ramps. You can see where the arrow is pointing. That's where the Alpha 45 or A45 grid line is. And just on the inside is where we saw the Model Ys being prepared for movement to the outside. So this brings to a close the tour that we were able to see with the General Assembly line of Cybertruck, and a little bit of a bonus here of the end of line for the Model Ys and what this looks like from the inside and what we can see with the drone on the outside. So there you have it, a great event, the Cybertruck Delivery Event. To see the first deliveries was outstanding, but to me, the ability to see all of this production line, to see the work that's been done, to install all of the equipment, all of the items, the materials, and get it all tested, calibrated, up and running, and producing the Cybertruck has been the highlight for me, in addition to meeting a lot of great people, a lot of the employees, and I just had an outstanding time. I hope that this video, the discussion, and what you're able to see was helpful and informative. And as always, thank you very much for your support. Really appreciate it. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.